Hello and welcome to the 2023 Netreo user group get-together and my session entitled Make Alerts Meaningful Again, Minimizing Incident Noise Using Netreo. My name is Jacob McJunkins and I'm a Trusted Advisory Services Engineer with Netreo. Been with the company for 2.5 years and I help customers get the most out of their Netreo product by configuring it to work exactly the way they expect it to. When there are a lot of alerts coming out of the Netreo system, that can result in a few different problems with the use around the Netreo product itself. One of the big ones that you first start seeing is problems with responsiveness to alerts. And then you might also see problems where alerts end up being ignored, or especially with email, you end up seeing people create rules to filter those emails to where they won't be seen instead. And so making sure that the alerts are useful so that they want to be seen and don't over alert or alert for unhelpful items can be very important. So one thing that ties into that a bit is ensuring that when you're making changes in the Netreo environment, it's often good to test small, try the changes for a template on a single device with the rediscovery before performing a rediscovery on all those devices, or other steps like that, to ensure that when you do make a change that could potentially create alerts, that you're doing it in a controlled way that isn't going to create a large amount of unactionable noise. And then another important consideration with this is, for the alerts that are configured, it can be important to try to determine or ensure that they are in fact actionable in the way that they're currently configured. And it's not uncommon for alerts to be set up for situations that seem like they're problematic, like the CPU being utilized, but if there isn't a specific action planned to be taken, then it could be that alarm, when it does go critical and the alert goes out, that it's deemed unactionable and remains on the system with re-alerts. And when those kinds of situations occur at a large scale, that's can contribute significantly to alert noise. So while it's still important to get alerting for all the potential problem scenarios, it's important to have clear indications of what the intended next steps are, at least a single next step for these alerts. And if there is no next step for them, then perhaps that's something to consider moving to a different type of alerting mechanism, or a reporting mechanism even. Next topic for ensuring that your alerting does meets the conditions that you need is to ensure that it's properly filtered to your use case. So it's possible to receive alerts when any Windows service is stopped. However, that will end up resulting in a lot of incident noise, and it's important then to only alert on the services that are critical to applications or have an impact otherwise on the usage of the devices that are being monitored. And so trimming down the number of services monitoring, or ensuring that specifically the services that are tied to the application. So for example, with SQL, you wouldn't necessarily want to monitor all the Windows services that get installed with it, such as there's a customer experience related service, and some agents that may or may not be important to have running all the time. But the SQL server itself has a specific service name, and monitoring that might be the key to ensuring that when you do alert, that it is for a useful item and not just a feature that was not used and was disabled later on. And then it's also important to determine between warning and critical states with alarms. And so you can see that on this initial dashboard that most users see on their systems. There's yellow and red indicators for the alarms in the tactical overview. And the yellow ones are what we refer to as a warning state. Those generally, they won't produce incidents if it's by default for thresholds. And they are intended mostly for the purpose of creating reports. So you can see, like for disk consumption, which all devices have breached a certain threshold for the purposes of planning long-term. This would be good to use inside of a review meeting for disk usage so that the planning can be done ahead of time. In the critical level, that's generally when the incident is created and when alerting is going to go out. And so setting that properly to the threshold for where action would be taken is important. So if you set it too early and the incident goes out, but there's still significant amount of disk space and it's deemed unactionable by the person who receives the alert, then as opposed to adding space immediately or taking an action to address the alarm so that it goes away, it may just be ignored and left for a period of time, and then there is no further notification beyond critical when it does get filled. Essentially, it'll be when the application is actually out. And so you'll want to ensure that the critical levels are at the moment when it will be actionable, so that an action is taken. And then to ensure that you're hearing about things prior to the time when action needs to be taken, perhaps in the middle of the night in some situations, using the warning mechanisms to receive that report ahead of time can prevent that kind of issue.
One of the main reports used to look for excessive alerting on the system is the detailed notification report. It can be found under reports, alerts, notification, detailed. This report can be run without having any of the filters set, but the filters are helpful when tracking down alerting for a specific grouping or for a specific time frame. By default, it's going to be set to the last 24 hours, but here I've extended it to the last 7 days. It'll show first a chart of the results indicating how many of the alerts that went out are critical, how many of them are recovery alerts, or if there are any acknowledged alerts, those will also be shown. And down below that, there'll be a table that shows all of the resulting alerts, and it can be filtered. Here we've got some filters pre-entered. Without those, you get the full list that matches the filters set above. This search box is more of a free-form search that can be applied to the results in real time. And for these results, we can see that shows the destination, the incident information, just the title, the incident ID, the device that created the incident. The destination was from the alert that was sent, so that'll either be an email address or a webhook in other situations, or syslog and SME trap, or some other options for these. Basically just any option you're using for sending out the alert information from the system itself. And then to the right of that, it'll indicate the status of the alert going out. So that'll be whether or not it was successful. So for webhooks, this could be whether or not the endpoint was available for us to send that webhook to, whether or not we got a reply at all or a valid reply. For email addresses, this could reference whether or not the email server indicated a successful delivery. Beyond that, we'll get information about the action group itself. So there are groupings such as customer service and ops in this particular system, but whatever the groupings are set up, your action groups will be what's present here. Then for the real-time filtering of this, I always recommend enclosing your search terms in double quotes, because this lets you include spaces in a way that you would normally expect it to. So if we wanted to include all of the incidents, perhaps that indicate that they're latency incidents, we can include both those terms from the title of the incident over here. And then the search box has the ability to filter on an additional term or additional terms if you'd like by adding a space and then another set of double quotes. We could potentially filter for, say, only the alerts in this that are critical. It's another option for that. And so this will let you dynamically filter it, maybe just the alerts that you're interested in working with. And from here, you can use this information to determine which teams are receiving the most emails, whether or not the changes you've made have successfully reduced the emails or the alerts generally that are going out. It also lets you, if you compare the time frames, change the custom times and compare this to a specific previous 7-day period or 24-hour period, and see with the chart information whether or not your incident trend is going up. So your alert trend, so whether it's going up or going down, essentially. And another good report that I like using next is the problem management report, and that'll be found under reports, incidents, and problem management. This one's also a relatively simple report to run. You do need to select a grouping, and depending on what you choose here, you may have to pick a specific grouping as well, but I often recommend just running it for all. The time frames are filled in by default. The initial time frame is the window for which it's going to see unique incidents that have reoccurred, or check for unique incidents, essentially. And then the look back window, the reoccurrence look back window, is how far back it'll look among those incidents for reoccurrences of it. And if we can generate this, then we'll see that certain incidents that it's sorted by default by the count of incidents. And so we can see here how often certain incidents are creating alerts or producing incidents more specifically in our environment. From this reading, we can see pretty quickly that the top incident creator in our system, or incident creators that we're seeing here, are for round trip latency thresholds being breached. And they've started way back at the beginning of our search period, it looks like, and they are continuing on until just recently. So these are still a problem, and this would potentially be an indicator where we might check to see if this latency is indicative of a problem state. Do we have a service that relies on a lower latency than this, or do we have an expectation of a lower latency than what's being reported, or is this maybe the expected latency at our threshold perhaps is configured to be too strict and might need to be loosened some. Now, selecting any of these will pull up a report that shows you the full list of these incidents. So you can go in and see individually what the values were for each breach. You can even trace that through all the way to the threshold itself to see what its configuration is and what template perhaps that's coming from in order to adjust that. Another place to go to look for the sources of alerts is the active incidents page. That's going to show you the incidents that are currently open on the system. So I've got that open here. That's found under quick views, active incidents. And here we'll see the full list that's sorted by how long the incident's been open, or really it's sorted by the incident number. By default, it would seem. But these will stay open for the duration of the time that the that the threshold or service check is in a critical state. So if you've got a device that has had the amount of free memory on it, below your threshold, where it's essentially out of free memory for a couple of years and still haven't addressed it, you may still see that here and find that perhaps it's never been acknowledged, and the team has started ignoring those alarms as opposed to either addressing the matter or perhaps it's a SQL or an Oracle server, and it's expected for it to be low on memory, and so that might not be the best threshold to place on that particular device, and should be overwritten in that scenario to check for a different critical state, such as the SQL service not being present. Opening one of these incidents will take you to the incident page itself, and one of those that we'll pull up. I'll go to that threshold one for the memory, and essentially on this page you can see information about the original incident that was created. We'll see that in this case the threshold was anytime it's lower than 250 megs, and the current value is 150, so not completely out of memory, but so perhaps the service is still running, and this might not be an actionable state. This could be that it's a threshold that isn't valid for this particular situation. But on this incident, we can find some additional details, like an important one is the notification count here, this number 7. It's also a button that if we click into it, we can actually see the individual actions, the alerts that have been sent out. So for this particular one, it seems like it was using a webhook. And for this webhook, these were actually sent out quite a little while ago before it was acknowledged, but this was actually before we had implemented the feature of having the additional information about a failure or success for these. So that's why these aren't potentially filled in, but in your average circumstance, you'd not only see where this was attempted to be set to, you can find out which action group was associated with this alert that was intended to be set. And if it failed, this output field is actually intended to be filled in for webhook. So you can see the failure message for the webhook itself. Another important place for and the final kind of reporting that I would use to see where potential alert noise can be coming from in the system is the template baseline report. And for that, we'll actually be going to the template administration page itself. So under administration templates, that'll take us to this templates page. Inside here, there's a button for baseline templates that's blue. What this page shows is a series of bars that represents of the alarms created in the system, what templates have checks in place that are responsible for those alarms to be critical. And so in this situation, we can quickly see that there's actually just a couple of templates that have thresholds, or thresholds specifically. There's a few incidents, but the thresholds from this particular template itself are the things that are constantly being breached. And so changes to that, and clicking into it, which I did here, you can get it even kind of more of a detailed view of how that's changed over time for different time periods. But this basic template report, or baseline report, this is a way to find if maybe you've got a lot of templates and it's hard to know which ones have checks applied that are problematic. This is a way to find, of those templates, which ones could be giving you the most problems. So once you've identified the different types of alerts that are problematic, it's important to know where to go to adjust those, and what the best settings are for addressing those kinds of things. So under administration templates, it's where we'll find the templates, and that's where all the service checks and thresholds would be applied, and those are also responsible for the host alarms that can occur. So going to the templates page, there's a few different options out here. You may have to know which template has the service check or threshold needed, and that's identified by tracing from the alert you get back to the device that triggered that alert, and then you look for the instance on that device that's in a critical state, with a service check in a critical state, and then see which template was applying that check. Using that, you would find one of the templates on this in this list. And in this situation, I'm going to edit the default one just because I know it's got service checks and thresholds on it. And inside these, the settings that are most important for addressing, we'll cover thresholds first. It's important to use an appropriate renotification interval. This one is common both to thresholds and service checks, but the renotification interval, it's easy to set it too low. Sometimes you even see numbers as low as 5 or 15 minutes, but generally somebody has not been able to see, for email, at least specifically, when that's set too low, that can quickly cause users to create a rule to put it into a separate folder and take it out of their view. And so having a higher renotification interval of something like daily can give a more appropriate reminder while also avoiding the reaction to the need to clean an inbox out, essentially. And that's important for situations where you're using email directly. Now, there's other situations like when you're integrating with an ITSM solution where having a higher renotification interval can be helpful. For example, if you've got webhooks going out to a separate ticketing system and you want to ensure that tickets are not closed out early ahead of when the issue's been addressed, then you can set the renotification interval low, and when a renotification for the alert is received by the ticketing system, have it set the case back to an open state if it's in a closed state at that time. So that kind of automation can help manage your the actual addressing of the issues if an ITSM integration is used. And then for thresholds, there's a specific setting down below that's very important for alert noise that's labeled time period. This is going to be the actual sampling period over which we average values. So by default, we will ping devices every 5 minutes. And so this is by default a 5-minute value. And that means that only a single polling interval is what is used to compare against. And so the values up here that you're using to represent the level at which it's breached, if a single poll shows a value above that, then the 5 minutes will trigger because there's only a single value used. There's no averaging done. So it's important to increase this at least to 10 or 15 minutes. This way, we're going to take that value, but we're also going to average the last couple values. And if it's just an individual spike, it won't actually trigger that alarm. It's going to wait till a true problem state being there. That can be an important thing to limit. Then the other factor on these is service checks, and these both they have the renotification interval as well. They have quite a few fewer settings overall. The only other configuration for alert noise is essentially the alert after. And so for this one, sometimes you have the option of setting an interval in minutes, but some other ones, the passive checks, will have a quantity of exceptions up to 3. So for this particular service check, we can change it to, instead of after the first exception, if this was a very noisy service check, we might want to change it to 2 or even 3 so that we don't alert just the very first time it doesn't meet the criteria it should. We might wait and check it again. So those are the different places that I would recommend going to check and make adjustments to address some of the noise. Those, and then potentially changing the actual values for your thresholds or the configuration of the service checks themselves to be less strict, and then really reconsidering maybe some of of the checks that you have in place to be whether, consider whether or not that metric itself is actionable in this scenario, whether there might be a better check to apply to alert you on that same the critical service that you're interested in. But if there are questions at all about this, I'll be available in the chat after this session, so feel free to ask them. I'll be happy to answer. Thanks for watching.